potentially they'll just recognise sculpture as just a decorative feature and not understand its social value that it provides. Having a sculpture as a central theme or connection to your architecture actually can create a greater sense of place and connection for the people that inhabit that place. So the way in selecting the best artist for a job conventionally is a weighing of 50% going towards a concept that an artist might be able to produce, 25% might be to do with his technical expertise and quality, and 25% perhaps to previous jobs that he's done. So the reason why this is flawed is it cuts out just about 95% of artists. The way to get around this is to separate the process, to judge artists on the fact that they are creative and to find the right party that can implement the creativity through the process. And that's why I suggest that engaging a public sculpture project manager is crucial at the very start of the process. It's a sad fact that sculpture often is thought about as a later addition to a design process. It's not common that clients come up with additional funds at the end of the process. It's more like they feel like they've spent too much and they're going to start cost cutting, which means it's highly unlikely to include something additional like sculpture. It's common that art galleries, art consultants and curators suggest that they have artists that can do public sculpture commissions. Now, I don't doubt that they have hundreds of starving artists banging at their doorstep and they've got huge databases of artists saying that they can do these processes. But the reality of it is when the curator, art consultant or art gallery goes through the range of artists to find who can realistically do the extra processes that are required by public sculpture commissioning, it comes down to a very small handful of artists that have got 20 or 30 years of built up process that can manage the process. So what in fact happens is those consultants actually turn back towards those artists to rely on them to organically deliver that process as part of what they do. The range of artists you actually have to select from will be very limiting, and thus the range of styles you can pick from will be very limiting. The better way to go is to pick the right artist with the right style base and separate the creation and implementing and engage a large-scale sculpture project manager. If you commission an artist to self-manage a large-scale sculpture project, it could be fraught with a lot of risk and danger. Most often artists wouldn't say no to an opportunity that's a large-scale sculpture commission. Because when they do say yes, I would imagine what goes through an artist's mind is that potentially we can learn organically how we can do this through the process. But what inevitably happens is in doing that extra learning, there are blowouts and time frames, or even things that are missed to do with engineering, or not even envisage the fact that there's going to be very heavy components to be able to shift, move, to logistically need to get to site. Things that are not commonly understood by an artist who's doing smaller scale. I believe the whole reason in putting public sculpture in a place is to make it a place and bring connection with its people. If the wrong sculpture goes into a place and it has no connection with its place, then people are going to wonder, why did they put this sculpture here? It's nothing more than plop art. It's been plonked there and it's based on potentially just an artist's ego rather than a community's need. So understanding what's needed from the onset by doing a site analysis is really important, because it may have you choosing different materials, so in the long run they will perform as they should. If you're creating something new and you're trying to do it outside of the country where there might be different culture and language, you've really got to understand a way of communicating that can run across the board between all platforms, between the parties that are in your own country, the designers, the client. You might be dealing with a client who is more from a financial background rather than a design background, so poles apart from maybe potentially creativity, but you want that person to fully understand what they're in for, what the design is going to be, so that there's no misunderstandings and hidden expectations that are not met. It's really crucial to understand that you have the right partners involved when you're doing something as large as large-scale public sculpture. Pre-qualifying them in the right way. You've got to understand that they're going to, first of all, respect your intellectual property. That other people are not going to see it on the internet and think they're going to create the same thing. This public sculpture is going to be unique to a client, and it shouldn't be with anyone else. Other things you've got to know are more to do with the integrity of the foundry. Can you trust that the foundry is not going to change materials that they've charged you for? It's really important that you understand a level of benchmarks that you can actually use to measure against. You also have to know the times when you need to check those, so you can check at the right predetermined point before the process goes on too far. If something's not checked at the right time and it goes on too far, it means that you need to backtrack in the process, and that could potentially cost you thousands of dollars, time, missing lead times, that sort of thing. If there's not the time to go backwards in the process, that could mean that a substandard sculpture will be delivered to your project. Not knowing what to do to organise all your commercial documentation and processes can potentially lead to a lot of time delays and lead time. Customs are very strict on what they'll accept, and often there are other processes, especially if you're packaging things with wood, having things fumigated and actually certified to that. If those things aren't done, they can cause further delays or can be refused. Goods can sit in the port gathering unnecessary demurrage charges until commercial documentation is as it should be. Being ill-prepared for installation is just not an option for a project manager. It requires organising all the parties, crane operators, labour hire, any extra machinery that's needed, weeks and weeks in advance. But then doing a pre-check a couple of weeks out and then doing another pre-check a week out. So it keeps everyone on track to make sure that when everybody's got their allocated time to be on the site, because often these sites are very busy with other trades, running to the last minute for the opening of the site, means that everything will run like clockwork and as it should. Otherwise, just one of those people or entities can pull out, and what happens? The whole thing falls apart. The reality is, when you install a large-scale sculpture, it would be uneducated not to inform your client that there is a future maintenance plan required. When the right actions are put in place and there's a periodic plan to do some minor maintenance, it negates the idea that there's going to be any major servicing needed in the future.